And we're live. Hello, Facebook. We're going to give folks a couple minutes to join us before we get started tonight. If you are here, let us know that you are here and have joined us. Just throw something in the chat. Sometimes it takes a few minutes for folks to get going with us, but we are happy to wait. Well, there's one. You know, I oftentimes say that this can feel like that you're having a party and you just hope that people show up, or that nobody's going to come to my party, which is nonsense because I throw the best parties. Yeah.
Come on now. Yes, I can attest to that.
Yes, you can.
Go way back. I can attest to that.
That's one of the things that's been difficult about COVID is that it just has killed my social life in so many ways. Even the social distancing piece doesn't feel quite the same. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although it's been 70s, it's been the nicest weather's been really good here. So I've thought maybe I should do something outside this weekend to see how that goes. Why don't we go ahead and get going? Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Stacey. I am the host of the Being the Dot podcast. Each week, I invite a guest or a series of guests to talk some about what it's like to be Black in white spaces. And I have a panel of distinguished guests tonight. Each of them have been on the podcast either in one episode or two. And I think, Dr. Tanya, this may be your third or fourth. But, you know, we do talk every day. So there you have it. But I'm delighted to talk tonight specifically about the elections. And I considered taping something, but it felt like that what was happening was a moving target. And things were so fluid and so dynamic that it made more sense to do it live than to actually try to record what was happening in the moment. So I'm going to stop and just give my guests a minute to introduce themselves. And then I'll be back on the other side. Why don't we start with you, Dr. Tanya?
Thank you, Dr. Stacey, and it's great to be with you and Earl and Pete. I am Tanya Ingram. I serve as the Director for Christian Education at New Faith Church in Houston, Texas. And I am obviously a very proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated.
First and finest, first at so many things.
And very humble today.
You got a mic there, Tanya. Oh, perfect. Mr. Shipp.
Dr. Stacey, it is good to be with you again. Dr. Tanya, Pete, it's great to see you guys. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Earl Shipp. I'm retired Senior Vice President for the Dow Chemical Company, and I currently serve on the Board of Directors of National Grid PLC, the world's third largest utility, and Olin Chemical Corporation, one of the largest producers of bleach in the world. In addition to that, I live in the Texas area, the Houston, Texas area, where I am a railroad commissioner for Brazoria and Fort Bend County. And I also serve on the board of directors of St. Luke's Health for Texas.
Mr. Thomas.
And I'm Pete Thomas, and unlike my illustrious guest, I'm still trying to figure out everything that I am in life. But so honored to be here with Dr. Tanya and Earl. I've done quite a few things, known Stacey for quite a few years, a motivational speaker, a sales professional, small business owner, done quite a few things. And I'm just honored to be here to be able to share a couple of thoughts with Dr. Stacey. Thank you for having me.
So and for those of you who are regular subscribers and listeners to the podcast, Pete was actually on the podcast for the Juneteenth celebration, I Love Being Black. And Mr. Shipp was on our, what do we call it? Living in the C-Suite episode, which is done actually quite well, Mr. Shipp, I might add. And Dr. Tanya was on the Happy to Be Nappy episode. Then, of course, you get me every time. So I think we should just get to it. And as I thought about structuring our conversation tonight, I thought about doing it chronologically. We'll see how well we're able to keep to that structure. But I'm wondering, as we approached the election 7 days ago, and we were looking at the polls, and or maybe you weren't paying attention to the polls. Maybe you had voted already or not. Just wondering, what were you feeling and thinking as you anticipated what was going to happen on November 3rd?
Yeah, I'll go first. For me personally, I anticipated that a change was in order. You know, we have been going down a specific road for the last few years, and a change was definitely in order. There's that old song, you know, a change is going to come. So I had a strong sense that the change was going to come. It was just a matter of how would that change happen. And the reason I said that I felt the change was going to come. Number one, in the environment that I'm in, I have a contract with a client, and I love the environment when it comes to political conversation. I have the owner of the company who's like Trump for life, right? And then I work around several of his sons, and he runs the gamut from libertarian to Green Party to never Trump. Trump ain't my president, right? And so this is all in one family. So I get to have these conversations about different things. And we've been talking about things over the last few months, and so I could see it kind of there in the wind that the change was going to take place.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and to make sure, I made sure I voted in person. I had to go and I had to see a machine register my vote, tally my vote. Since you mentioned that as well.
That's good. I would love to know how everybody else did. And before we do that, I see some folks have joined us. Why don't you go ahead and throw in the chat how you were feeling before the election a week ago today, about what would happen on the 3rd or whatever. Go ahead, whoever was going to go next, please.
So I would just say that I was feeling anxious. First of all, with regard to just so much violent rhetoric that had kind of been thrown around, and the dispersions cast on the integrity of the process. And so I was really just concerned about the physical safety of voters. Would people come out? Would folks decide that, hey, I'm not going to vote, it's not worth it? And so feeling really anxious about that. And then I think also just kind of, I've always understood it, but it's just been impressed upon me even more the way I feel very passionately about this election, the way I felt about our democracy really kind of being threatened. There were people who felt the same way, but for a different reason. And so I just felt like we really, really needed to, come out and vote. You've seen a bunch of my posts about justice and mercy and the issues. And so I really just felt like there was so much at stake. And would the democracy just kind of hold up, given the pressure and the tension that we had, this election had really kind of put it under, and really the last 4 years of this administration.
That's good. What about you, Mr. Shipp?
I was where Tanya was. And I was thinking as she was talking that, her viewpoint was a little bit different than Pete's, and it may be location based. Tanya and I live about 20 miles apart. And at least in our neck of the woods, there was an awful lot of support for the president. People were, marching in parades, and there were car parades and boat parades and, all kinds of that. I mean, very, very strong support, across the area. Now, you still saw support for the Biden and Harris ticket, but, you saw a lot of support for for Trump, even after everything that's gone on for the past 4 years. And she's nodding her head. We both saw that. And I think that was just a byproduct of the environment that we lived in. And so it made me quite anxious, to the point that, I had to just prepare myself to say, okay, if he gets reelected, then that was God's will and he'll get us through it. I mean, I was at that point. And I also was where Pete was. My wife did a mail-in ballot. I didn't, because I didn't trust the system. I went to early voting, but I wanted to go put my finger on the machine, go get the ticket, make sure that my vote was counted, because I was concerned because, some of the rhetoric about not counting votes and everything else. And it was maybe a little bit stronger here than in other parts of the countries. But there was a certain amount of angst that, the outcome might not be what we want.
So Julia Freeman says she was feeling cautiously optimistic, and Charmaine Lee indicated she was anxious, but then she had a piece, kind of what you were saying, Mr. Shipp, about whatever the outcome was. So I actually live in Pennsylvania, and you're welcome, America. I live in rural Pennsylvania. And similar to what Mr. Shipp described, there is Trump memorabilia everywhere. There are roadside stands selling flags and hats, and not like a flag, but like a flag. And so the Trump stuff was everywhere. But what was different for me about this time and the last time was there was also Biden stuff everywhere. In the previous election 4 years ago, you could not find, like, we would talk about it when we socially engage with each other, that, oh, I saw another Biden. I mean, I saw another Hillary sign. It's at so and so and so and so. Like there were like 4 that I could name at the time. And actually, Tanya was here during that time with me, and she can attest that there was just not a lot going on for Hillary, but there was a noticeable difference this time around. I was also nervous and concerned, particularly given the proliferation of guns in my area. It's actually hunting season, and the stand up, stand back, whatever the rhetoric was that seemed to be a dog whistle to some of the more violent entities that supported our president, was very, very concerning to me. And I actually we had decided to go. And a very high level executive at my university was walking to the post office with his partner. And he said, if the president thinks that mail-in ballots are a bad idea, that is saying that it must be the best idea ever. And so they were walking with their ballot. And it was that night that I thought, you know what? We're gonna vote earlier. I found a way to vote and not have to mail it in, and that's what we did. And I will tell you, I felt a sense of relief once I had done that, had gotten that kind of off of me, and got my ballot in. And who knew that in the end that the mail-in ballots would be the thing to turn this whole thing around? Yeah.
Well, one of the things. Go ahead, Dr. Tanya.
I was just going to say that, I don't know that, sometimes you deal with this anxiety and you just kind of muddle through it. But I voted in person. I voted early, but I voted in person. And I chuckled when I left because I went with a backpack, Timberland boots, umbrella. I packed my chair. I had snacks. I had water. I mean, you would have thought I was running away from home or something, and kind of, just breezed in. I was there from door to door, probably about an hour, but it was a very smooth process. And, it just kind of reminded me, yeah, you are feeling anxious. You need to pray. You need to calm down. God is still in control either way, but I really prepared in person for the very worst. And, thankfully it wasn't that way. But earlier, as Mr. Shipp said, we had seen these long lines. There had been some hiccups in Fort Bend and Harris County. And so, I think it does have to do with kind of where you live. And so that was just interesting. But I went in person and felt much better afterwards.
Pete, you were going to say something?
Yeah. I was going to say, I was thinking almost from the very beginning that the mail-in ballots were going to be the big difference maker. For one, I wondered whether or not Biden would last the entire, the election season, right? I was wondering and worried about his health. And the other thing too, I think what happened was that you had the Democratic Party, they were very strategic, right? And strategic meaning that if you look at just statistics, Hillary, 3 million people stayed home in 2016. 3 million people that voted in 2012 stayed home in 2016. So the Democrats were not taking any chances with that. They were like, okay, you can stay home just send this joker in, right? Send this joker in. And so that was their strategy from day one, was to make sure that those votes got in. And so I was not surprised at all that, for instance, like I just came up with this number in my mind. I was like, okay, so from all the mail-in ballots, you're going to have 75% of those are going to go towards the Democratic Party. And so it was not that part was not a surprise to me at all, because I think that was a huge strategy that worked for the Democratic Party, and that was big. That was big for them.
Let's hope it continues to work, because there's starting tomorrow there are going to be a bunch of lawsuits filed to try and throw out some of those ballots. And in your state of Michigan, the Supreme Court had to rule on it. We had similar issues That's here, right, where they had set up drive-through voting at established voting places according to law, and there was a significant effort to try to overturn that. So some of the anxiety was not without merit, and I think we even see some of that now. The election's over. People have all voted. The votes have been counted, and yes, there are going to be some recounts and everything. But, this is not a done deal yet. And I think, some of that anxiety was valid. And I think it's important that we remember that, not only for this cycle, but for the future as well.
Oops, I agree. And one of the things that I hope that comes out of this, if nothing else, is the importance of voting, the importance of engagement, and the power of our voice as a collective if we use it that way. Yeah. One of the listeners also shared, Charmaine Lee, when there are other ways to cast a vote, it shows that people will vote. And I guess I'm wondering, what do you think about just the turnout being like more votes were cast in this election than any other election in the history of this country?
I think it's quite interesting if you look at what really happened in this election, particularly the 2 or 3 days after the election. For the last 3 to 4 years, we've had an administration that was hostile toward Black Lives Matter, even to the point of saying that they were a terrorist group. They had gone that far in some of the rhetoric. And so here we are 2-3 days after the election, and, they didn't want to recognize Black lives, but now they have to count Black votes. And they lost Michigan because all those Black people in Detroit voted out the president. They lost.
Those are your home people, Mr. Shipp.
Black people in Philly and Pittsburgh voted out the president.
That's right.
They lost Georgia because all those brothers and sisters in Atlanta wanted to vote out the president. They lost, Arizona because all the Hispanic people were tired of getting beat up by this local sheriff who was convicted in federal court, and then the president pardoned him. And so now all of a sudden they're recognizing that, hey, well, Black lives may not matter to us, but Black votes can make a difference. So I think the takeaway is exactly what you said. We should never let anybody tell us that voting doesn't matter, because this is a classic case of where our votes not only mattered, but it made a difference. And the reason Clinton didn't get elected was because we were kind of lulled. Obama had been president for 8 years. We didn't show up, and then we had to deal with Trump. And so there's a lesson there. There's a lesson there for all of us about the importance of our vote and staying engaged. Because if we hadn't been engaged, this discussion would be very different right now.
I agree. So Pete just sent me something in the private chat that I'm wondering if he is prepared to share more broadly. Okay, very good.
So I'm going to throw this thing out. I believe that what this does is this sets us up for the end of Black political power, right? And of course, this is completely opposite of what everybody else says, but let me explain why. We vote in one direction. So what I want you to do is I want you to imagine a checkerboard, all right? If you're playing checkers, and I actually brought a checkerboard, right? I bought a checkerboard. If you see, this is a checkerboard, right? Well, this is Black folks voting. Okay, what we do is we vote in one direction and one direction only. What I mean by that is we are only on one side of the board. We play, and you can't see it like that, but we play over there so that only this group here, we're Democrat moving in the Republican direction. We don't play both sides. And that's a huge problem. And what I mean by saying it's a huge problem, it's a huge problem that this other group that I'm going to talk about doesn't engage in. For instance, we have 3 Black senators, you know, and of course we got Kamala, the brother from New Jersey, and Tim Scott, right? Well, there are 4 already. There are 4 Hispanic, you know, Latino senators, 2 Republican, 2 Democrat, right? If you take in all of the members of all the members, African-American members in Congress, 52 representatives, 54, I think I have 54, my latest number, right? 52 of them are Democrat, 2 are Republican. Hispanics are not like that. And Hispanics don't do that. They've got 45 members, right? 31 are over there on the Democratic side, 14 are Republican. And so those of you down there in Texas, you know, that's some of the big discussion. There are places that are right by the border that Trump won, right? In Florida, the reason that Trump killed it in Florida is the Hispanic vote. So, and we are homogenous. We always show up to vote in one direction. And here's my opinion. I believe that voting gets you influence, but voting does not get you power. It takes money to get power. And for instance, I go all the way back to Martin Luther King, right? Martin Luther King had great influence. But when he was stuck in the Birmingham jail, right, his attorney had to go up to New York City to a man with power. That man with power went down into his bank vault and gave the money to Martin Luther King's attorney to go bail Martin out. That money is what brought the power. The man that gave him that money was Nelson Rockefeller. So I think this is the end of Black political power. And here's the real reason behind that. There are only so many agendas that are going to get moved forward at any one time. During the Obama years, the agenda that got moved forward was the LGBTQ agenda, all right? And I predict that over the next few years, maybe it'll be 8 or whatever, 8 or 12, the agendas that will move forward past the Black agenda will be climate change and the Hispanic, Latino, Latinx agenda. Because Latinos, they play both sides. And economically, not just with voting, they play both sides. I have an article on my computer here about the sugar barons, these Fajal brothers out of Florida, right? And during the 2016
let me stop
election,
you just for a second. So let me stop you just for a second. I wonder if Dr. Tanya or Mr. Shipp would like to respond to that.
Go ahead, Tanya.
Well, I think it's a kind of a very interesting perspective. I think that as African Americans, we are expanding and we are not necessarily voting in block in that way. I think that what we are learning to do is to accept when we don't vote in block and not look at it as outliers. But I think that we had a lot of conversation this election cycle about, you know, African Americans and being an African American Republican and what does that look like. And so I think that we are moving that way. And it's interesting because folks like Ice Cube and 50 Cent are, you know, kind of leading us in that discussion. And I'm happy and I'm fine with that. And so I don't think that it is going to be the end of Black political power. I think, if anything, that it is going to inform and shape it. And I think that this win is going to really kind of speed that process up. That we have down here a Wesley Hunt who was running. And he is very well supported. I don't think he won his race, but he just lots of kudos on. I was looking at his Twitter page, like, we want you to run again. We support you, blah, blah, blah. So I think that that is going to, you know, really help us to get there. It's interesting you talk about the issues that will be kind of front and center of the ballot. And I think that what happens is that what you're talking about outside of the climate change is that there will always be a group of people that on either side will want to promote, you know, justice and equality. And so I think that, you know, that won't get lost. it's interesting, I had to really kind of go back and understand Trump and Florida and the Hispanic Latino community with this argument of socialism and communism and, kind of like, come on, Biden, Harris, y'all got to speak to this, and just in reading, it is really important that we understand kind of what I think is where fear kind of mixed into politics, where that fear agenda that we're going to be a socialist, communist country. It's like, we're greedy capitalists. That's not going to happen. Y'all don't worry about that. But kind of what that really looks like to have your country fall and you feel like the country that you're living in now is going in that direction. So yeah, I mean, and I hear what you're saying, Pete, but I don't think so. I don't think that's kind of where we're headed.
Now, endemic, I would to endemic at that point. I'm sorry.
Stacey, you're muted.
Let Mr. Shipp answer.
No, I was just going to say, I think Pete has a point. I don't think it necessarily has to be that way. One of the takeaways from this election is that, if you lull us to sleep, you can win, because that's what happened in 2016.
That's right.
But if you stir us up, which is what happened in 2008, what happened in 2012, and what happened this week, we're going to show up, and we're going to show up in big numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And we're 12% of the population. So if we don't vote as a block, we lose our leverage, which is different than the Hispanic community, because they're a much larger overall constituency. So they actually can split, because about 70% of them typically vote Democratic and the other 30% vote Republican. But the reality is they have larger numbers. So if you just do the math, they can get away with that. We're 12, 13, 14% of the population. The voting in a block gives us more power and more leverage. So the issue becomes, and to Pete's point, if we allow politicians to lull us to sleep, they're still doing things that are not in our interest, but they're not being, overt about it, which Trump did for 4 years. We don't get stirred up. We kind of don't go vote, and then we end up back where we were 4 years ago. So I think Pete's point is a warning also, that once you engage, you better stay engaged, because now people know how to take advantage of us.
So, and I also think that, I don't think that African Americans are a monolith. I really don't. I think that we think from diverse places. Certainly, I had a Black Republican on the podcast a couple months ago who talked about her journey to the Republican Party. And so I do think that is the case. And I actually, Pete, I disagree with you. I think actually that we are at the pulse of mourning as it relates to our political power. And I get what you're saying about money. And I think that is true. And then there's some people who say that capitalism and democracy are terrible bedfellows, right? And I think my Facebook post said the road to the White House is through Philadelphia, Detroit, and Atlanta. And I think that speaks volumes. And I think that if the Black vote was never so important, other than when Obama came through, that I think it was in this election. And I do believe that part of Sandy Cope says, I believe that the high voter turnout was a function of people saying enough is enough of racism, homophobia, enough xenophobia, enough corruption, enough lies. And so I think that that is part of kind of what the deal is as well.
So you got to help me with this. I mean, just logically speaking, if we said enough is enough. Now, remember, we had some amazing women, right? Whether it's Keisha Lance Bottoms, whether, all the sisters that have been involved in this, right, came out, rallied, got the Black vote out to elect the man who authored the 1995 Crime Bill.
I know, but people can't evolve.
One of the reasons,
people can't evolve.
Of course, when they get called out on it, publicly. So this is one of the reasons why I say it's interesting that entertainers are now leading us, because our political leaders have failed us. So there's a difference between symbolism, and we're going to have a Black woman vice president, likely be president, right? We will have these Black faces, but there's a difference between symbolism and substance. And when we're talking about substantive things, when our communities still have the worst schools, I mean, how long have we been talking about since the Civil Rights Movement, right? When our schools, when our communities still have the worst crime, right? How many years we've been doing this? We've been at this 40, 50 years doing it the same exact way. I think that's why it's on the decline. There are only so many agendas. And if we haven't figured out how, there's one of the things that's interesting to talk about, speaking truth to power, right? We've had the Congressional Black Caucus. We've had these folks sitting right next to power, meaning the Democratic Party, who typically is in control of the school system. And our schools aren't any better. I mean, come on now. Somebody got to help me understand that.
Well, it's interesting because I think what you are saying begs the question from what Ice Cube and Lil Wayne and who was the third one?
Nothing. I have no idea.
Just say Lil and that'll cover it. Lil somebody.
Little somebody. Somebody tell us in the comments who the other one is that became kind of Trump curious for some of the reasons that you've indicated, Pete. And it does make me wonder about the two-party system. And like, is that the right thing? Is there like, should we be doing something different, etc.?
If they're not serving,
I mean, one of the things about the entertainers, if you really break down what they said when they originally said it, it was an economics discussion.
That's right.
And I know a few African Americans that, that are strong Republicans, and I suspect they probably voted for Trump. And they always have as their number one issue, it's the economy, or it's their economy. And so only when they started getting pushback, then it became more nuanced. And then Ice Cube had another comment to make, and 50 Cent had another comment to make. But initially, it was all about the money. And that's very different than saying that I have a social agenda that I want to promote. They weren't talking about making the schools better, which is what Pete said. They were talking about keeping their taxes low. I mean, and that's a very, very different discussion. It's not illegitimate. I mean, and it's okay for people to vote their pocketbook, but that's not moving the race forward at all. I mean, and so, I listened to them, but I can't say that they were leading us. They were taking positions that were in their own personal best interest. That's my point of view.
And pocketbook Republicans are real.
I didn't say it was wrong. I just don't agree with it.
No, I called it out. So that people being pocketbook Republicans, that's a real thing.
And so I think what we'll see is, especially with the way the House and the Senate are kind of split right now, is that we won't see this far left agenda, that there will have to be, moderation, and it is a moderate approach that we will have to take. And I think that is really kind of what we are seeing, that this super progressive agenda that we're going to be looking at over the next 4 years, that, there's only but so much that we can kind of deem as important. And so, just kind of what does that look like? And so, climate, maybe not. I think, right now, realistic where we are, it's COVID, it's the economy, maybe some reforms with education, maybe, and then we're at 2024. And so, I just think that, that's these realities that we face today, that's going to shape it. I also want to say is, when I look back at the 2016 election, to suggest that it was, kind of an African-American loss, I think that there was just this lethargy across the board, that Hillary was not connecting. And it was also, and not to bash millennials, but when they did not see Bernie, and those Bernie supporters did not see Bernie go up, then they decided they were going to take their marbles and go home and leave the playground. And so I think this Trump administration has shown, why it's important to, again, stay engaged. So, I think that there were a lot of reasons why we ended up with the Trump administration. And that certainly.
And I think one of the other things that I would note is white lash. I think that 8 years of an African-American leader was more than some white people could stand, period. And that, and certainly not the only reason, but Trump was able to successfully tickle that part, that internalized racism, implicit bias, those things enough to galvanize a group of people. I was in a grocery store a while ago, and I was in line, and there was a woman in front of me, and she was talking about how much she loves Trump and all the things that he has done for the country, but not really saying anything really. And then the cashier says, well, I'm just glad that he restored our free speech rights. And so it was then they both looked at me, because now it's my turn, right, to say something. And I said, wow, we couldn't disagree more. And I don't have anything to offer. Like, ring my bread up and I'm out of here. But just the kind of misnomers and falsehoods was part of what he banked on, and he really did what he needed to do to awaken the fear of white people that is connected to their own implicit bias.
I don't think there was some psychological manipulation along the way, right? He came in running on division. I mean, he talked about from jump, let's build the wall, let's keep those Mexicans out, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, there must be some measure of truth, because people near the wall, Mexicans near the wall, voted for the man, right? So maybe not all, as we mentioned before, maybe they're not a monolith. Maybe there are Mexicans who are even concerned about immigration themselves, right? And we have to take that into consideration.
Absolutely.
You mentioned something.
I'm concerned about immigration, and I also think that, and then I'm going to move us a little bit. I also think that we need to not forget that racism is a systemic thing, and the untangling of it is not an easy situation. And so I hear what you're saying, and I think that the dismantling of racism, or the building of an anti-racist America, has to be done one bite at a time. Yeah. So we'll come back to this, Pete, but I just wanted to kind of move a little bit and ask folks, where were you when you heard about the outcome of the election, and what were your initial thoughts?
I remember my first thought. It was Saturday morning, and I got a note on my phone, and it must have been maybe 5 or 10 minutes after I think CBS originally announced that they were making the call for Biden, and then my first thought was, well, the process isn't over yet. There's still a lot more left to be done. They had announced that there would be a recount in Georgia. The margins are very, very close, and so I think where we are right now feels good, but as we began the discussion, I think everybody's kind of cautiously optimistic, but recognizing that this isn't over yet. And I remember 2000, with the hanging chads, and the Supreme Court intervened, and we can't say that won't happen, because it did happen in the past. So I think we have to stay vigilant. Let's let the process work, but let's also keep our eyes open.
Nice.
Yeah, for me, it was similarly. Actually, I got a text from somebody, a sister in the Lord. She was like, "They just called it, and I'm out here on the road. I'm running home to check the news." And I was like, "Wow, okay." And then my mind just goes to larger things. Oh, it's Saturday. That's convenient to call it right before the Sunday morning news shows. So I'm not thinking in terms of conspiracy theory, but definitely coordinated. Like, okay, now it's time to call it. And other than that, no other thoughts. Like, okay, it's good timing. Y'all did it in the right time. I'm still very cautious. I think
Mr. Shipp and I kind of share in that. I was in the car on the way to the church for a funeral, unfortunately, and my husband called and said they called it, and I said okay. But I was talking with my daughter, and she said, "Yeah, they called it," and I'm like, "Okay." I will feel better on January 20th. Is that the inauguration day?
Yeah.
That's when I'll be like, "Yes, they called it, and they called it right." It feels. I guess it's humbling and kind of this nightmare, and it's like, is this really over? And
Mhm.
what will be the residual effects? I mean, this does not feel like the Obama win, and now let's pop the champagne and run around and screaming and jumping. We still have so much work to do. And so it just feels like that's one hurdle. And so now it's time, to kind of roll up our sleeves and get ready for the next phase of this.
Mhm. Mhm.
I think there's also another thing to consider on this. In terms of what can be done, there's still the big question of, what's going to happen with the Senate. And we're not going to know that until sometime in January.
Mhm.
Right.
And the
Mhm.
reality is, if Mitch McConnell is still the majority leader of the Senate, I don't think any of Biden's agenda will go uncontested. I mean,
Mhm.
if you remember what he did in 08 and what he did in 012 and what he's
Yeah.
done with the Supreme Court, I mean, I don't, I'm not optimistic at all there that they won't be anything other than blockers with the mindset of let's just slow everything down, stop everything
Mhm.
until 2024, and then hope we can get back, in the chair. I mean, that's the likely scenario if we end up if we don't end up with a good outcome in the Georgia Senate races. So,
Right.
in terms of, which agenda we're going to follow and how effective we were going to be able to get things done, the reality is, I'm not sure that Washington, D.C. is at a point where anybody is willing to compromise at this point. And also, let's remember the majority of Caucasians in our country voted for Trump this time, with 70
That's
million
right.
of them voted for Donald Trump. And he's
That's right.
still there, and he still has his Twitter account. He hasn't
Yes.
gone
He
anywhere. So,
does have his Twitter
I mean,
account.
that is the the reality of the landscape that we're facing over the
Mhm.
next 2 years at least.
Yeah.
So a few of our listeners shared that they were in their exercise class, and at the time when it happened, or somebody, one of the therapists on the line said that she was with a client who she knew would be happy about the announcement, so they paused and talked. Amanda Gillette, who is actually one of the podcast interns for the Being the Dot podcast, she lives in a house with like-minded creators, and we all messaged each other immediately and was extremely happy, but mostly relief. Relief was the strongest emotion that everyone felt. I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and so is our vice president elect. And it happened to be the morning of our chapter meeting. And I had gone on early for a bylaws workshop, and we had gotten done a little early prior to the business meeting starting. And I said to our president at the time, Madam President, wouldn't it be something if the announcement was made during our chapter meeting? And if so, I'd like to move right now that we go into recess immediately, and maybe I would play some music. And she said, cue it up. And somebody else said, do you really think it's going to happen? I said, absolutely not. It'll be days. And there was a moment that she was giving her formal presentation, and you could see people on the Zoom freaking out, like literally. And then the chat started going crazy. And somebody finally said, Madam President, our soror has just won the election for vice president elect for our country. And she said, would somebody please move that we go into recess? And the motion was made, and I queued up the music, and we celebrated a little bit, had just a little bit of sisterly time together. It was fantastic. And I thought that it was just magical. It'll be something that I never forget, in the same way that each of us probably know where we were when Obama was announced as the president of the United States. Yeah. So what's next?
I think Tanya hit it. Number one thing is COVID. I mean, we got to get COVID fixed, and that's not an issue for any one group. That's an issue for the country and maybe even for the world. And I understand that this is Sunday. I understand that Monday, tomorrow, the Biden administration in waiting is going to announce a COVID task force, because even before they start, naming people to cabinet positions, they recognize that, that's hurting everybody, and we got to get that, under control. And so I think that's the path forward. In terms of what the agenda is going to be, I really think we're not going to be able to say until after the Georgia Senate races are over.
Mhm.
If the Senate is a Democratic Senate, then, there's a long list of issues. Pete listed some of them here, just a few minutes ago. We would have an opportunity to maybe go address some of those things. If it's a Republican Senate, a Democratic House, and then a Democratic president, that's going to be a significant issue, because the new president won't even be able to name his cabinet without going through Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate. That will be the reality if the Democrats are not successful in Georgia. And that means a much more limited agenda, like Tanya was saying. I mean, obviously, COVID, fixing the economy, that helps everybody. Beyond that, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of, bandwidth in the Senate to do anything progressive. They're going to dig in their heels and try to wait him out and hope that they can get back in charge in 2024.
Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if any of our listeners want to throw something in the chat about what they think is the right next thing. Go ahead, Dr. Tanya. Go ahead.
Great, Doc. I'm sorry. No, Doc. Go ahead.
I am very just concerned about relationships and community. This administration has just been so divisive, and just the intensity of our discussions, the name calling, how do we get back to a place where we are civil with one another, where we can disagree, advocate but disagree, and then just this the reality of the amount of misinformation and how two sides could be so far apart. I mean, sometimes I'll just turn on Fox News and listen just to anchor me, and it is just amazing, the passion that I feel about our democracy and where our country is going, that there's someone that feels equally an opposite passion, and knows that they are right. And then I think about how we look at our faith structures and our belief systems. And so I am just really concerned about, the damage that has been done, that leadership challenges you to be at your better self. And we have not had that racism and division has been stoked for the last 4 years. And so how do you kind of push that back and start to heal, understanding that that's the context that we live in, and how do we address those fears? And so I just think I'm hoping that Joe Biden has presented himself as someone who understands government and understands how to compromise and work to get things done. And will that happen? I'd like to believe that some folks went along with Trump because he wields that kind of power and influence and fear, and maybe they didn't mean everything that they did or didn't do. But we just don't know. So I am just concerned about kind of the healing of our nation. How are we going to have conversations, and how are we going to get to bipartisan work in Washington when we are just so divided and wounded? I mean, families have split, and it's just that's kind of my concern. How do we heal this?
Yeah, I would echo something Dr. Tanya said earlier. I'm actually in favor of gridlock in Congress, to be honest, because I believe that the original intention of the congressional system is that people who had differing views would come across the aisle and to come up with some kind of level of compromise. And if there is not that, then I don't know if I want either agenda to move forward. One of the things that Obama mentioned, he had a recent conversation where he sat down with LeBron in the barbershop, and they talked about the priorities being the COVID, obviously recovering from the economy, and then prison reform. And to me, we're still not advancing Black people, right? If we deal with prison reform, where you're just going and undoing what Biden started back in 95, so we're still not advancing. And when I look at advancing specifically for Black people, this is just my powers of observation. There are three things that Black people that are pillars, I'll put it up on the screen behind me, that are pillars for Black success. Number one is the Black family. Number two is education. Number three is the church. I don't think that there is absolutely anything that the Democratic Party is going to do in any of those areas that's going to advance Black people. So I don't have hope for that. My hope is that Black people will get engaged more in capitalism, because I believe ultimately that you buy political power, right? You buy political power. Like, for instance, we know around the country the places that schools work. We know that if you go to New York City, you look at success academies, you go to the KIPP Academy, we know these things work. The Democratic Party is opposed to those things, right? We know what works. And yet they're definitely not going to push those forward. And I'm not saying that Republicans are, but I just have, like, for instance, you look at the people on this call, besides me, overcame racism, overcame every issue that was presented in themselves with these, at least two, if not all three of these things, with the family, education, church. You overcame because of these things. And I just don't see the government advancing these things for us to be successful. So I have no hope for the government providing solutions.
So for me, I want us to make racism wrong again. That my hope and wish dream is that somehow that, and I don't want racism recloseted, because that's not helpful. And I want it to be okay for someone to say that's wrong without people falling out, like you told them that they have to give you their firstborn. I also would really like to see, I agree with Dr. Tanya. I do think that we need some hope and some healing as a country, that there are, I mean, even in some of my own relationships, that there are, this political stuff has wreaked havoc a little bit in some of those relationships. So I am grateful that it is over and I can get back to the place of loving folks despite, and not that I stopped loving people, because Lord knows I didn't, but at the same time, I think that is the case. I also am, I think that I am hopeful that Joe Biden understands that the reason that he is the president-elect is because of Black and brown people. He seemed last night in his speech to really have a deep understanding of that. And I hope that somehow that turns into action and into tangible things that are different, or at least that he's trying to make things better for my folk. I agree though that this COVID thing, I want my life back. And that I'm hoping that a vaccine will come forth, that actually listening to the scientists and not bucking up against them will be helpful to us as a country, that whatever has been successful in other places, like, we don't necessarily need to recreate the wheel, that they've been countries who have been able to contain the disease very quickly. And maybe we can learn some lessons from them and then implement those in our own space. And I really, really hope that people do continue to be, that the momentum that has started around political engagement continues. That I hear lots of people talking about supporting the Georgia election and doing something about that. And so I think that's important. And I'm praying for peace. Because
Amen.
all of this energy about this election will have to go somewhere. And so I'm really hoping, and that's from the top down to Billy Bob driving his Ford F-150 down my street with the 6-foot flag on the back of his truck, that I'm praying for peace from the top to the bottom, and that we will have a peaceful, that once things are settled, that we will have a peaceful transition of power, and that we will be able to move on, to build back better, to make racism wrong, and get to the work of what needs to happen to make our country even better. So I'm going to just open up. We have about 4 minutes left. I wanted to open up the line to see if any of our listeners have any questions for our panelists, and to see if any of our panelists had anything that they'd like to share as a final thought.
Well, let me throw this question out to you all, and it's specifically related to our community, right? Because I believe that as I look at politics, right, whether it's nationally or globally, there's an environment globally of division. If you look at what happened over in France just in the last couple of weeks, right, with everything that's going on, where the government is specifically coming out against not just Islamic extremists, but it's almost coming out against Muslims in general, right? At least that's how it's being taken with other Muslim nations around the world. So I see, in the midst of this environment of division, what do you think are the main things that you would want the political party, the Democratic Party, to do to advance our people? If we were the ones to get us in office, what are the things that they should do to advance our people? And are there specific things, right? Because there's the broad brush things of, disruptive or systemic racism. I have no idea what that means, because I don't think that's happened anywhere in the history of the world where a minority group is raised to the level of being equal with the majority. But beyond that, are there any specific things you think that they can do to advance our people?
Anybody?
I think Stacey may have hit on one of those. The last 3 to 4 years, we've made it okay for overt racism to exist in our society. We've said that it's okay, and actually encouraged it to some extent, and that's from the top. If you hate on people, it's hard to do anything. We all have to live and share this space together, whether it's the country, whether it's the world. And there are other issues that we have to solve, and we can't do that if we're fighting each other. I think that is probably the one thing that could make a difference. If we can make it not okay for this overt racism and class distinction to exist the way it does, that might open up the door to go do some other things. As long as that exists, the walls are up, nobody wants to compromise, and then you don't get anything done on any level. I think the issues that you talked about make some sense. What can you do to shore up families? What can you do from an economic standpoint? The 3 pillars. There are other things that are out there, and certainly COVID is kind of overhanging it all. But the reality is you can't hardly move the needle on anything in a federalist democracy unless you can get to compromise. And if you can't talk to people and kind of see where they're coming from and find that middle ground and move forward on contentious issues, you never get anything done. And that seems to be the mode that we've been in for the last 4 years, maybe even longer. Probably the last 2 years of the Obama administration was the same way.
I agree.
And as long as we're in that mode, we can come up with the greatest ideas in the world, but the will to go do them won't be there. And I think that is the challenge that we face.
Mm-hmm. And then I think for me, just to inch that along, then the next big thing we would see is that compassion and civility are expected, acknowledged, and rewarded. That we have just lost our ability to be compassionate and civil. And we have had, an example that has said the ruder you are, the better, that has made kindness a curse. So we really need to get to the place where we have compassion and civility. And when we can do that, then I think we can have the conversations that we need to have. It is not lost on me that there were 70 million people who voted for Trump. And I don't think it's all because they're rednecks and they're racist and they're bad. And, they have their reasons. And it's interesting. I said in a previous life, or maybe I didn't, I worked in higher education. And at my last institution, I worked in just this very kind of rural place and saw the Rust Belt and the lack of adequate health care and access to it, and the opioid addiction just wipe out communities. So if we can come to the place where we can talk about the human dilemma and the human predicament and how it impacts us all, then I think, that would help us. But I believe that for the last 4 years, we've all been stripped of our humanity in some way. And when we do that to one another, then it's just very hard to talk about priorities and agendas and anything else. And so I think compassion and civility need to come back in style.
Well said. Civility is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
It is not. And nor is kindness, for that matter.
Right.
Right. I think one of the ways that I would like to operationalize what you all have said is around police reform. I am completely exhausted by the fraidy cat. Like, we need to give police a fraidy cat test. And if you scare easily, then and you are trigger happy, then you may want to consider another profession. But I do think that we need to think about what is the right next step in police reform. Certainly, the cell phone has become one of the powerful tools of the revolution. But one of the things that happened the last time we were in this racial reckoning period was body cams. And so we've come to know more and able to hold people accountable for both of those things. And so then what is the next iteration in police reform or law enforcement reform or reform of the prison industrial complex? I'm excited about the energy around HBCUs as a graduate of Norfolk State University. That yes, you can smile, Tanya. It's okay.
I know.
Yes, honey. That I'm excited about the potential of that taking a little bit more center stage as well. So this notion that that they don't prepare you for the real world when the second most powerful person in our country is a graduate of an HBCU is exciting to me. And so those are the places that I remain hopeful. So we're at 1 hour and 101 seconds. And so I wanted just to kind of give you a moment if you had anything last to say. And if not, I'm going to wrap us up.
I think
I'm always honored.
I think we're all saying pretty much the same thing. The outcome from this week was a positive development. The challenge now is how do we take best advantage of it? And there's some short-term things, which is what message do we send to our leaders on what we want them to do, and then hold them accountable to go do it. They got our vote, so now go deliver. But then I think there's a longer-term strategic look as well. We now have a much better understanding of how to wield the power we have, because we were able to make a difference in this election. We don't want to forget that. We don't want to let the Russian trolls or whoever else, start sending messages to us in Facebook and telling us that our votes don't count, because we know that's not the case. And so how do we make sure that when the next election rolls around, people are asking us up front? And I don't quite know how to get there, but that's what we have to do. Because if we kind of bounce from election to election, and then sometimes we're engaged and sometimes we're not, and then when we're engaged, we're a block, Pete's checkerboard starts to, that example starts to become reality, and that won't serve us. I mean, we have to stay engaged. I mean, that is the challenge for us. We didn't get here overnight. We're not going to fix everything in 6 months or 18 months. It's going to take longer than that. Sure. So we have to stay engaged over the long term and make sure that, our voice is heard up front.
And all I have is be kind, be nice, be kind,
be different, be nice. That's a
be
whole
kind, be compassionate, be civil.
Yeah, how
Come
about
on, amen. And I'm just honored to be on the panel. I love the perspective, and I think that those last few points there, changing the narrative that's been going on over the last 4 years. I think I have this cynical side. When I'm listening to Biden last night, he was eloquent. He said some great things, right? Then the cynic kicks in, like, well, you had 47 years to practice this. I hope you'd get it right. But it may be that we need someone like that who can calm the waters and smooth the waters of division over, to do exactly what you all have said. So, I think those are great takeaways. Great takeaways. Be civil, be kind.
Yes. So the last.
Let me just say one last thing, though. I
Mhm.
do think, Pete, that, and I don't want to give him too much credit too soon, but I think that Joe Biden may just have the intestinal fortitude to be able to say he was wrong and try to correct course, whereas others have not been able to do that. So
I understand.
and he shall remain
Generation late,
nameless.
but okay. Generation
But
late, but
also
okay.
remember the guy that's,
things. Go ahead, Mr. Shipp.
I was just going to say, the guy that signed the Civil Rights Act of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65 was like Biden.
Right.
So,
And yep.
good point, Tanya.
And Biden also signed the Sexual Assault Act.
Mm-hmm. He did.
He did. He led the charge for that really expanded services and all of those things for women. And so, and I think what we know is that no one person is everything. That
Sure.
Joe Biden, when Obama was elected for 8 years, that he was not our savior, right?
Mhm.
And neither will Joe Biden be that for us either. And it is certainly better than what we have had when somebody who was openly saying that our lives don't matter.
From a political standpoint, we'll know once we get a look at what Kamala Harris's portfolio is going to be.
That's true.
Right.
That's
Yes.
true. That's really good.
That's when we will know, because when Biden was vice president under Obama, he was the last guy in the room. He got the last word. Obama relied on him. He had an awful lot of influence, and he was able to get a lot done. I think once we see what her portfolio is, then we'll have a good indication of what's going to be going on over the next 3 to 4 years. If she has a strong portfolio and she's the last she's the last woman in the room, then, her understanding is probably more aligned with ours. And so to the extent that she has real influence, that would be a good thing.
That's a great point.
And we will know that within the next 2 to 3 weeks.
We will.
Just what her influence level will be.
So I just have 3 things I want to say. The first is to Ice Cube, 50 Cent, and whoever the other was, because I can never remember, but somebody did say Ice Cube, 50 Cent, and Lil Wayne.
Lil Wayne.
If we want a third-party system, please have the initial meeting tomorrow. And don't come up in 2024 talking this foolishness. And so if that's something that you think that we need to do it now. The second is, don't forget Georgia. And so while none of us live in Georgia on this call, and I don't know if there are people who are listening who live in Georgia, but don't forget about Georgia. And so you can phone bank and text and email and all of those things from where you currently live. The last and final word will be this: Kamala Harris 2024.
Of course. 2022.
2022.
Well, at least we know she'll be able to beat Kanye.
Oh, Lord. That's another hour, Mr. Shipp. That is another hour. Oh, God.
You know what? And with that, we're going to end.
Please.
Thank you so much to our panelists and folks who are listening live with us, and all of those who will listen subsequent to the recorded episode. Please join Being the Dot next week, where our topic is mentoring, where we will have someone who is an expert mentor and her mentees talk with us a little bit about how mentoring is such a vital part of our lives and how important it is to have somebody who you are being mentored by and to be mentoring someone else. Thank you again, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
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 Thank you.